Welcome to Talk to Me, a podcast to provide a safe and brave space to have courageous conversations about the changes we want to see for system-involved young people. The aim of this podcast is to support young people with issues that are commonly encountered in the foster care and juvenile justice systems, and offer resources to navigate and overcome these issues. We really have exciting guests, subject matter experts, and young people with lived experience on today's episode. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. The creators of this podcast recognize that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tatatvion, Sereno, Quiche, and Chumash people. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past and present and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevate the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments. To learn more about the first people of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City/County Native American Indian Commission website at lanaic.lacounty.gov. Now on to the episode.
Hi everyone, my name is Sherrie and I'm the host today for the Talk to Me podcast, which is Tay to Me podcast. And I have these lovely guests here with me today. Today we're going to be talking about workforce development, but also secondary education and higher education. And I'm super excited to be here, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves.
Hello, Nicole. First, thank you for having me. My name is Franco Vega. I'm the CEO and founder of the RightWay Foundation.
My name is Yanira. I'm the Workforce Development Coordinator at KIPS in the Spotlight.
My name is Joshua Elizondo. I am a Los Angeles County Youth Commissioner, and I also was on the California Community College Board of Governors for 2 years.
Okay, so we're going to go straight into the first question. In your guys' personal experience or experience in working one-on-one with young people, what are some of the challenges you think youth face when they're trying to get into higher ed or workforce development?
Well, as far as workforce development, I think them going into workforce development at a younger age is harder. I believe that they should start off at a much, much younger age, at 12 or 14, and nothing demanding, because I know we have labor laws, but something like selling candies and things like that. Me growing up, I started off selling candies and selling flowers, but this child welfare system keeps our kids on lockdown, and where do they expect to gain their experience? And it starts at a young age, even like doing a car wash, they want to let our foster youth go out there and wash cars, fun experience like those. So I believe that the child welfare system really holds our youth back, They'll let them go at 18 or 21 to get into the workforce, but now you have a bunch of kids that didn't grow up in the foster care system already have much more experience. So we're always trying to play catch up.
Okay, and to continue, I just wanted to add, as far as I know, the workforce development is also about networking. Do you feel that, based on the rapport they kind of have growing up in the system, is that also kind of a little bit of a hindrance as far as networking? You know how people say networking. Do you also see that as a common challenge with our young people?
I believe the networking part, they don't train our youth on networking at a young age. And us at the RightWay Foundation, we work with the youth that come out of level 12s and all those high-level facilities. And so, our young adults know how to burn bridges, and it's not their fault. But yeah, you're right. We don't teach our young kids on how to network. They're quick on how to burn the bridge, once again, because that's all they know. And so, yeah, your networking is a big part of success. It's who you know. And our kids can't pick up their cell phones to call someone and say, hey, give me, I need a new job, you know, compared to other youth. I know some other kids that can call someone right now and say, can you give me a job? And someone will call someone else and get that kid a job. But not our kids. And once again, I want to stress, it's not our youth fault. It's the system that they grow up in.
Yeah, I think going off of that, I think one thing that I've noticed that's especially frustrating is these systemic inefficiencies that youth have to face when they're already at a disadvantage because of sort of the lack of stability and continuity that they grow up with. So when you're getting moved from home to home or from school to school, you're not getting that sort of continuity that's really important to be able to build relationships with teachers, with your peers. And all of these connections are really important to a youth's upbringing. And when you're not even able to develop that, and then you're faced on top of that with like bureaucratic systems that their goal is essentially to sort of let a few youth into the academic system or let a select few into specific workplaces. I mean, it becomes a system where youth have really hard time navigating it, and not because of them, as you stated. I really like what you guys are saying, and I do like how you guys kind of center around it's not their fault. It's more of like kind of like being in a system lockdown or being in a situation where there's a lot of inconsistency. So when they do go out in the real world, it's like that's kind of what they're wrapped into, and they just don't know like where to turn and who to trust. Did you want to speak a little bit more on your experience?
Yeah, I would add, I think, a lot of it has to do with, as we mentioned, 18, 21, kind of like letting them into the real world and not having that guidance per se. For myself, I'm reaching certain milestones now that I'm older in life that my peers per se reached younger because they had that guidance from parents and different things. And so for school in particular, I have noticed as a first-generation college student, and it's common among first-generation, not just foster care, but with those that went through foster care like myself, trying to figure out what classes to take, when to take them, how to do that, how to balance work, and all those things leads you to be in school a lot longer than you would have been if you had somebody telling you what to do, and kind of having those skills. And I would also say that while the system doesn't directly teach you how to network, I think, as I've sat with the skill sets that I got from being in care, it's also about looking at the perspective of what you got from care, because having to bounce home to home to home to home in a way is networking and learning how to assimilate and how to be around other people and figure out what's okay in this setting, what's not okay in that setting. And so as an adult, I've kind of shifted the narrative a little bit about my trauma and experiences from foster care to be like, no, I am good at networking because I was in 15 different homes. I am good at doing these different things because, and now as an adult, I've taken on those skills, but I've told myself those things, not necessarily somebody else telling me how to network in different perspectives. And so, yeah, I definitely think that everyone, what we've talked about is it's just there's a lack of guidance from the system, but some of those things are innately like in us from the experiences that we got.
I really like what you said about shifting the narrative, and I did want to like highlight also you guys too in this next question, where you said, well, I am good at networking because I was in 15 different homes, and I'm able to get a higher paying job because I'm able to assimilate and be in different structures because of those 15 homes, right? So what kind of initiatives and things that you guys are building within your guys' programs, within your life, that is kind of changing that narrative, but also providing that support for young people now who are trying to reach higher education or workforce development opportunities? Or if the goal is like, hey, I just want to get a job and stay consistent for a year, like what are you guys doing that's shifting whatever they've been through into like actual curriculum or something that they could stand by to reach those goals?
A lot. Well, we've been doing this work since 1995, workforce development. And right now we're asking corporate America, since we're in the homeless capital in the world right now, and our foster youth are leading the way, we're asking corporate America to give our youth housing and a job at the same time, So not only are they hiring our kids, they're providing a subsidy for their rent. So now they know that they have good employees coming in that have a stable place to stay. And that's a model we're rolling out right now, and it's catching some traction. That's one main thing we would love to share, because it's hard for our youth. Remember, at 21, our youth that's been around at 15 group homes, THP is probably not going to be an option for that person. Let's just be brutally honest. That's not the cream, so they're going to really have to go out there and survive. So, it's just we're thinking outside the box, and then we're asking corporate America to understand our youth too at the same time, because sometimes I remember we would get a youth a job, and the company calls to say, well, Franco, they don't smell as fresh. And I said, well, did you take the time and see what's wrong with them? And they found out our youth is homeless. So then they had a little bit more empathy and said, okay, this kid is just homeless, so we're not going to fire him, but we're going to try to look and see what can we do to provide them with some services. So, and then training our companies to be mentors and managers at the same time. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. The days that I'm old, and so, I come from a generation, you can yell at me and I'll do something. This is a different generation now. So you can't just yell at kids or yell at young adults and expect them to listen with a smile. Good thing I say about this generation, you guys have a gift that we didn't have. You guys will quit a job on the spot. That's a gift, I've had many bosses or CEOs that I worked with for 8 years and I couldn't stand them. I disliked them tremendously, but I wish I had the courage to just jump ship back then. I'd probably be further along right now. So yeah, we're thinking outside the box, and that workforce development it plays a very important role on both sides.
And then I also wanted to highlight, because I know you lead the workshops, and I know you do it in trauma-informed ones. Can you speak a little bit about that and what you kind of tell the youth, the engagement process? Because I think a lot of people can attest it's hard to get youth in rooms and stuff like that. And I wanted to highlight that. I know you also, all your workshops and stuff are paid opportunities. So if you could speak on that too, for also advocating for more people to pay their youth to be there. So yes.
Well, we run the program, our umbrella or our bread and butter is called Operation Emancipation, which is a 5-day workshops. We do stipend them off at $400, and we tell them day one we treat it like a job. So if they're late, we ding them. If they come in smelling like some certain flowers, we'll send them back home and tell them to come back in tomorrow. So we right away treat it like a job. You did mention trauma-informed. We're more culturally competent. Okay. Trauma-informed is last. And trauma-informed is basically just don't cause no more problems. Don't hurt them more than they never even hurt. But culturally competent is the main one. Is if you can't reach them, you can't teach them. We speak their language. If I got to drop an F-bomb, I'll drop an F-bomb to get a point across. And it's been win-win. Our retention rate is very high. But it's just a different approach. It's more of a rites of passage style. And then everyone who facilitates come from the system. So I was in the system. So we hate to say I know what you went through, but we have an idea. I remember the first day they locked me up in juvenile hall, the first thing guys do when you get locked up is we cry. No one even admits that. Prisoners, same thing. When men get locked up for years, the first thing they do is cry. So we share the real stories with our young population, and they can relate.
That's good. Yanira, or Josh? One thing that, in terms of workforce development initiatives that Kids in the Spotlight is rolling out, we're currently building out a registered apprenticeship program. Gavin Newsom recognized our politicians in California recognize the importance of apprenticeship programs because they provide an alternative to formal schooling. And so this apprenticeship program that we're building out, it's going to allow the youth that we work with to get paid, get certified in video editing right now, but we're hoping that we're able to reach out into different avenues. But in video editing, this allows for the apprentice to get formal experience in a profession with still getting that support from a mentor. So we're trying to build out a trauma-informed system where they're able to sort of get certified, get a pathway into a profession, and still, develop their life skills and their professional skills and all of that. So that's one thing that we're really focused on.
Yeah, I would say on the education side of things, there's a myriad of resources. There's the different Guardian Scholars programs. When you're in other states, there's foster programs like campuses. Here in California, I was actually on the Community College Board of Governors when we passed the expansion of Next Up programs. And so, there's tons of resources out there. I think the first thing I actually say about youth and foster care and just people in college in general is if a youth doesn't have a purpose, like you could send them a bus, a lift, they're not going to get on. They think so. These workforce development programs and the apprenticeships and the different things provide avenues for the youth to figure out what it is that they want to do for their life. We can't just tell them. And so even though there are these programs on campus, I always try to work with youth one-on-one to figure out like what it is you want to do. It's okay to not know. You can be undecided. A lot of youth don't know that there's options to take classes. I don't want to take math. Okay, well, you can take basics, XYZ, and counts of math. And they didn't know that. Like their personal finance, for instance, at Santa Monica College counts for the math credit. Mm-hmm. So there's different things that and ways to showcase to the youth that there are paths forward, but you can't just tell them. They have to want it for themselves, and that takes getting to know them and really working with them to discover what it is they want to do for their own lives.
I really like all the stuff that you guys are saying, and I like how you guys all have different like ideas about these specific things. So we're going to take it all the way back. So imagine when you guys were younger, right? I know you have lived experience. You have lived experience that you're also working with the foster youth population. And then I know kids also works with like low income, Black and brown communities. What would you tell your younger self, or what would you tell a young youth who's just starting out, who's maybe around like 8 or 9, they want to get a job eventually, they want to go to school, and they have all these goals and dreams, but they enter in the foster care system and they're moved from home to home to home to home? Or what would you tell your younger self that would have kind of helped improve your journey into workforce or into higher ed?
Ooh, that's a hard one for a 9-year-old. I wish someone would have preached to me that it wasn't my fault, that where I'm at wasn't by the choices that I made, And that's a hard thing to tell a 9 or 10-year-old, Even when I was 15 in and out of juvenile hall, I still didn't understand it. But yeah, I would say for the 9 and 10-year-old, the system should keep us as much as they can normalized, put us in a Little League, put us in Girl Scouts, things like that, I knew right off the bat I was in the system, and that's what they should work on, trying to teach these kids, not to make sure they feel like they're still in the system.
Yeah. I would add to that, because I really like what you were saying, that for me, it's going to be hard to say this to a 9-year-old, and they're not going to really fully understand. But at the same time, I would tell them the things that they're experiencing now are making them more resilient than a lot of their peers, because their peers get into a car accident or something, they get a B grade, and their life is just devastated. And for instance, I was recently in a car accident, and it's just like, okay, go to work. Like there's a resiliency there that you have to be careful with about the trauma and like taking care of yourself mentally and physically, but also a lot of it will put you ahead of a lot of your peers in a certain way that right now it may not feel like it.
Yeah, I would say that your experiences, which are a direct result of our systemic inefficiencies, do not have to define your future and your potential and what you're capable of, because a lot of times I think that we think that all of these negative experiences that we've had are because we lack something or we're not good enough, but that's not true. And I think, again, that is something that's really hard to explain to a 9-year-old, but I hate to take on my thumb with that. Next question would be like, what can social service agencies, nonprofits, community-based organizations do to combat just like the access to higher ed and the access to workforce development? Like, what can they do right now to kind of like, whether it's collaboration, whether it's like outreach, whether it's like exposure? Because I think too, another thing that we've been hearing is sometimes people just don't know services. So I know like back when my brother was talking earlier, he was active in this podcast earlier. He was like, well, I didn't know that you could go to college and there's these scholarships back when he was trying to go to school. So he just missed out on going to school. So what do you think that organizations or social service agencies can do right now to help combat these issues? And even if you guys are doing your own work, just elaborate that.
I would definitely say exposure is the biggest piece, like just constantly sharing and telling youth, because they may not be hearing it from someone else. So that's the biggest piece. I also think, though, on the side of the actual practitioner, there is something to talk about eliminating barriers. Because, for instance, in my education, I grew up in the Detroit foster care system. And when I moved to Los Angeles, Detroit didn't want anything to do with me coming out here. And LA didn't want anything to do with me being out here because I'm from over there. And so I had issues accessing resources and different things that were guaranteed if I had stayed at home. But as the state is my parent, I didn't want to. I wanted to come out here, do a career in entertainment, follow marine biology, do whatever it was I wanted to do that was only possible here. But I wasn't able to access those resources. So just taking away barriers and different things for youth to strive for whatever it is in their life that they're trying to go for.
Well, to piggyback off the gentleman, easier access, like you said earlier, collaboration, mandate that our foster youth get these slots, these workforce development slots. Remember, workforce development slots go to everyone. So you can come from a 2-parent household, no child welfare, and you can get one of those slots. I'm a firm believer that it should all be going to system-impacted youth. That should be the start. Sadly, we have a new administration coming in, and he's about to cut the budget. So it's at $15 billion right now for the Department of Labor, and it's about to probably go down to $10 billion. That means that's our work for internship dollars. So all the things we're talking about, apprenticeships and stuff like that, that's going to be cut slashed. So we got to make easier access. We got to fight for more slots for the most vulnerable. And I think it'll work itself out. But, that's some heavy lifting. It does. Our leaders want to do the heavy lifting. And that's where the community can come in. Because I can lift anything and I can yell and be a mouthpiece. I don't need votes. I don't need votes.
I definitely echo the slots for foster, because the Television Academy has an internship program which they set aside 1 or 2 slots for foster youth every year. I was one of those interns for one of the years, and that definitely helped my career in entertainment behind the scenes. And there's been tons of other foster youth that gone through that because there is that slot that is sponsored through the Children's Alliance in different capacities. So,
yeah, I think piggybacking off of both of these responses, I think simplifying processes is definitely important, as was already stated. But I think it's also increasing pointed DEI efforts, so hire system-impacted, former system-impacted youth, hire these individuals into positions of power where they can be a voice for everyone else, because I think representation really does matter when it comes to workforce development and getting those opportunities. So that's right. That's what I really think. So we are kind of wrapping up this section. So what is your guys' call to action? We have a lot of people that are going to be tuning in to watch this. We'll have government officials. We have youth tuning in. What would you like to say as far as a call to action for more support on supporting higher ed, more support on supporting workforce development, and then also just leaving a lasting impact to a young person who may feel headed down and out, may not be having the best of life right now because of their situation? What kind of advice would you give that young person to?
Call to action would be ask society and the community make an effort for corporate America to give us the slots, hire our foster youth, because our foster youth will show up. That would be my first call to action. The second one would be just have our youth on the other side just get ready, and then treat every opportunity like it's their last. A lot of things I blew up because I thought something else would come behind it, and that sometimes you miss that boat. So we got to preach to our youth that, hey, take advantage of this opportunity, regardless of what it is. I like what he said earlier. We shouldn't be forcing kids into their career or young adults into their career and let them figure it out and find it. But I'm always hearing, Franco, they need to be doing something. All they need to do is show up, and they'll figure it out.
So I would say to the legislator and the government per se, whoever those people are, that at the end of the day, the state, the government are the youth's parents. You are responsible for getting them through life, through childhood, through adulthood. And it doesn't just necessarily stop at 21, 25, 26, whatever the age range is for whatever state or county or place you are at. It is a lifelong journey. And if you're trying to nurture and engage productive, active citizens, these are your responsibilities, specifically foster youth. To the foster youth side of things, I would say that, for myself, it took me a long time to realize that claiming being a foster youth wasn't necessarily a negative thing. There's a lot of stigma out there. There's a lot of things that I don't necessarily associate with, but now talking about being in foster care is helping change the stigma. But the flip side of things, when I first applied to college, I didn't want to say I was a foster youth because I wanted to get in on my own merit. I had a 1.2 GPA in high school. I barely passed anything, and I wasn't getting in. So, now looking back at it, it's definitely say you're a foster youth, take all the money that you can get, live it up, get into the programs. Who cares if you're there just for that reason? You're there. The world works in ways in which a degree or some sort of training is necessary nowadays. And the easiest way you're going to get that without taking 10 years like it did to me was just out the gate saying, I need help, I'm a foster youth, and taking the resources. So
I would say that my call to action for sort of political institutions, academic institutions, is to really fund that research that shows that the stigma behind certain labels that we assign to youth, behind certain characteristics that we tend to assign to youth that are system impacted for foster youth, how that impacts the youth's likelihood to reach out to these resources and organizations that certain schools offer, certain institutions offer. And so going off of that, I think one of my call to actions for youth is to don't let stigma and negative labels get in the way of you reaching out to receive welfare support and housing support and all of that, because I had conversations with youth that are scared or don't want to sort of reach out to or receive these sort of support systems because they think that it's it's not a good image, or I don't really want to, I don't feel like I need it. So that's my call to action.
Thank you guys so much for this conversation, and thank you so much for a lot of the resources and opening up about the different initiatives you are a part of. So all the stuff that was talked about here today, all the resources specifically for this topic are going to be linked below. Thank you guys, and have a good day.